Tomorrow night, Vice will be premiering season 5 of Dark Side of the Ring. And they got an interesting lineup of stories to tell over 10 episodes. And the one they're going to be starting, the one they're going to be starting out with is The Ballad of Earthquake, John Tenta. Now, I grew up on Earthquake. I grew up on John Tenta. I saw him, go from being a heel to a babyface, to him going to WCW as Avalanche, to being the Shark, to being, mainly himself, and then making a return briefly to WWE in 2001 for the gimmick battle royal at WrestleMania 17, and then for a brief opportunity in a dark match before SmackDown against a local opponent or somebody. I guess to try to get a job with the company. And, like I said, I grew up on him. I remember his feud with Hogan. Like I said, him and Typhoon being tag team champions, being heels and faces. I mean, Typhoon originally was Tugboat, and Tugboat, basically real name Fred Offerman, is the godfather or uncle of Cody Rhodes. That's the truth. So yeah, to see, Tugboat, who used to be rivals with Earthquake. I mean, he was Hogan's answer to Earthquake, if you will, back in the early 90s. And then he, like I said, he suddenly turned and became Typhoon. They became tag team champions, and the rest is history. Now, why do I say that, or why am I saying this, you might ask? Why am I saying this? Well, because quite honestly, if you haven't seen Dark Side of the Ring, you should give it a chance. There's a lot of shows that spun off from this. There's a lot of shows that spun off from this. For example, you have Dark Side of the 2000s, Dark Side of the 80s, the 90s. You're probably going to get one that's called Dark Side of the 2010s, Dark Side of Football, Dark Side of Comedy. You got one that's based on Dark Side of kids shows, like like shows on Nickelodeon, like You Can't Do That on Television and Double Dare and stuff like that. I think there's been discussions they might do things like Dark Side on baseball or whatever. There's a lot of shows that have been inspired, spun off from this, into their own series, which have been huge hits. Dark Side of Music, I think, which is interesting. I think they did something like that, or they did, they were considering it. I'm not really sure, but the ones I mentioned, Dark Side of the 2000s, Dark Side of the 80s, the 90s, Dark Side of Comedy, football, kids shows, which is a new one they're doing. All this came about because of Dark Side of the Ring. And why, you might ask? Well, because Dark Side of the Ring basically explores, stories that you may have heard of, but you may not know of. And that's an interesting concept in its own right. To hear stories that you may have already heard of, but then you're also hearing stories you may not know were even, real, about certain situations. And when it comes to someone like Earthquake, John Tenta, a lot of people are like, well, what's so dark about him? And that's what makes Dark Side of the Ring so interesting. The fact that, you may think there's nothing dark about him, or there's nothing that could be negatively said about him, but yet, you're going to find out maybe there are things about him you didn't know. You didn't know, that, happened behind the scenes. I mean, we've heard stories of how he felt about, his final days in WCW and stuff like that. And, we've heard of things of how he, wasn't the same after he lost some weight. He wasn't the same Earthquake, if you will. And, that's one of the reasons they didn't want to sign him back to the company and so on. There's a lot of stories that we may have heard of and some that we don't know of. And like I said, that's what makes Dark Side of the Ring so compelling, in my opinion, and a must watch. It really is. It is a must watch a series that you have to, take your time and really, devote yourself to on a weekly basis. I mean, I've been watching it since the beginning. When they would premiere. I think they did it like 2 years in a row, 3 years in a row. They did for 3 years, 3 seasons in a row actually, 2-hour premieres. They did 2-hour premieres, 3 years, 3 seasons in a row. One on VENMO, one on Pillman, and I can't think of the other one. But they did that, and that got people's attention. Now, unfortunately, they don't do that now because I think of budget reasons. But that's why they also have a podcast now here on YouTube and on places like Spotify, I assume, where you can listen to Dark Side of the Ring unheard. And what's that mean? It basically means that you can listen to the host of Dark Side of the Ring, maybe with a guest host, if you will, talk about, what they covered in that episode, but also go into more detail of what you didn't hear about in that episode. So I really like that, they're taking the opportunity, the opportunity afforded to them, with the momentum and the fan base they have for this, the people that like this kind of stuff, and they're running with it. They are running with it and not looking back. And they realize if they get a season 6, if they get greenlit for a season 6, whether it's Vice, whether it's YouTube, wherever, they know that there are more stories in professional wrestling all across, the decades that can be told. And even if they don't have the footage that might allow them to tell a full-fledged story, they know they can, they could talk to certain people that might be able to, from a historic standpoint, might be able to, let them in on certain situations. Like they'll let them in on how this went down, what they were told, and through reenactments, they'll be able to kind of show us and give us an idea of what was a certain situation with an individual. And again, I think that's really good. I think that's really cool. I think that's really good. So overall, just trying to find the right words to say here in this video, I do recommend, if you've not checked it out yet, I do recommend Dark Side of the Ring, as well as I recommend the other Dark Side series it spun off from. Dark Side of 2000s, 80s, 90s, Dark Side of Football, Dark Side of Comedy, and again, I think they're doing one on the Dark Side of kids shows. Like the You Can't Do That on Television, Rumpus Room, you name it. So I highly recommend checking those out along with Dark Side of the Ring. I think you'll really be invested in what you see, and you'll get a better idea of why people love pro wrestling and why pro wrestling's not as fake, as you think it might be, especially from a behind-the-scenes standpoint. So I just wanted to come on here, recommend that to you guys for those that have not seen it and are wondering why it's so popular and why it's spun off all these other Dark Side series. I thought I'd just come on here and let you know about that. But give me your thoughts down below, guys. Live chat during the premiere. Like the video, and